everyone. My name is Emma Jones. I am a first-year master's student in the City Metropolitan Planning Program at the U, and I'm here to talk to you guys a bit today about the Thriving in Place project and the background before we get into the survey results and some of the things we've learned from our community members. So initially, let's talk about why we're even doing the Thriving in Place project. Salt Lake City has been seeing a lot of growth in recent years, but not every resident is seeing benefits to that growth. It is disproportionately impacting others over some, and the city of Salt Lake wants to make sure that all of their residents are able to not only have safe and stable housing, but also that these benefits of the growth that Salt Lake is seeing are shared with everybody. So by doing this, by doing Thriving in Place and by making sure that we can combat displacement, we can make sure that Salt Lake is an awesome place for people to continue to live, just like it's always been. Awesome. So as a part of the Thriving in Place project, we've had 2 classes at the University of Utah that have been working with Thriving in Place. The first one being the Westside Studio class, which every year works on a project related to community development in Salt Lake, and gives students an opportunity to work with community members and give them experience with community engagement work. Organizations that have previously worked with the Westside Studio class include the University Neighborhood Partners Program, Neighborhood Works, the community councils on the west side of Salt Lake City, the Public Lands Division of Salt Lake City, and other groups. The second course that has been working on Thriving in Place is the plan making class that was taught by Alessandro Rigolon. And this course focuses more on planning documents and how these planning documents are shaped by social and economic, political, and environmental contexts. And specifically in this class, we've been analyzing the pros and cons of mainstream planning practices and looking at some examples of plans across the US and looking at ones that have specifically successfully shaped cities, the physical form of cities in the long run. Awesome. In addition to these 2 courses at the University of Utah, we have a lot of other members of the Thriving in Place team that we would like to go ahead and thank. Notably, we have Baird and Driscoll Community Planning that's been focusing on strategic planning and policy analysis, and the UC Berkeley Center for Community Innovation that's been focusing on gentrification analysis and displacement mitigation, as well as our 2 professors from the University of Utah, Vis Garcia and Alessandro Rigolon. In addition to the students that have been working on this class, we also have our steering committee members that have also been doing important work on the Thriving in Place project. So a big thanks to everybody. It takes a lot of people to make a cool project like this happen. Alrighty, so the Thriving in Place project has had 2 main phases. The first one has started in January, where we've been focusing on getting community input from residents and analyzing and mapping demographic data so that we can analyze trends with both gentrification, but also to kind of get an idea of where people are living and what issues different communities might be facing. And then in the last month, we have been reflecting on all of the awesome stories that residents have shared with us and have been thinking about potential options that the city has for acting as we move forward with anti-displacement efforts in Salt Lake. And those priorities will be continued to be solidified in phase 2 of the project, which will be happening over this summer. Awesome. So in this first section of the project, we've been working to understand the problem of gentrification in Salt Lake City. So let's get into how we've been doing that. All right, so in the first phase of the Thriving in Place project, we've been focusing on engaging the community in a lot of different ways. We wanted to make sure that we were able to engage the most people as we could. So we've tried to use a variety of strategies for community engagement work, including going to community council meetings, to talk to residents there about the Thriving in Place project. We've conducted in-person and online surveys about people's experiences with displacement and gentrification. And as an incentive to try and get people involved in the project and to complete the survey, we've had gift cards to Mestizo and a gift card raffle to Red Iguana. So a big thank you to them for providing those. We've also been conducting focus groups with people who've experienced displacement, with key stakeholder groups, project partners, and our community liaisons, which we'll get more into later in the presentation. We've also been working with the youth in Salt Lake City, and we've had several youth workshops at local schools to talk to them about gentrification and to get their experiences on displacement as well. Cool. So then in this last month, we've been taking all of the stuff that we've learned from our community and have been reflecting on how the city could interpret that into action items and policies in the future. We've also been doing some cool community events like painting murals. The photos of this one are of the mural at the Confluence Park, which was a really awesome event and really cool opportunity to be in the community. Alrighty, and then in the plan making class, we've been focusing more on demographic data analysis, but we did do some community engagement as well, going out and getting intercept surveys and hanging up posters. But for the most part, we've been analyzing data using Esri software and Excel, and using that to get an idea of the kinds of problems that each of our neighborhoods in Salt Lake City might be facing. And then with all of our results from that analysis, we've been combining that with the survey feedback to identify key anti-displacement strategies that would be really tailored to each of the neighborhoods so that we can make sure that the work that we're doing is locally based.
Awesome, thank you, Emma. And so yeah, in order to advertise Thriving in Place, especially the website, we participated in many activities within the community. Next slide, please. And first, we visited 13 community councils to help them navigate the Thriving in Place website, encourage them to take our survey, and show them some work that students completed while taking a previous class that was taught by Dr. Garcia. Last semester, the community engagement class conducted 420 interviews with residents in every single community council in the city. They also created a story map, which included demographic changes from 1970 until 2019, maps of community assets that should be preserved, and signs or stories of gentrification and displacement. Were added to the council agenda anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes, gave them ample opportunity to ask questions. And yeah, you can go ahead and go to the next one. Thank you. And while attending these meetings, we actually heard a few themes, and these themes were people are generally worried about rising housing prices and are willing to move to different neighborhoods, cities, or states to own their own home. City should really focus on more housing for young families. These communities that are being affected and the businesses that are in these communities are actually becoming less racially, ethnically, and culturally diverse. And we need to support our individuals that are experiencing the various forms of houselessness.
So to encourage even more people to check out our website and complete the surveys collectively, we distributed about 300 Spanish and English bilingual posters to the city in public. The point marks are where we have put our posters. We focus on putting them in schools, community learning centers, grocery stores, cultural centers, and any sites where many people pass by to expose our posters as much as we can. We also designed and prepared some stencils written with our website link. We have painted a total of 150 stencils on some trails and parks to encourage people to visit our website after detecting them from the floor. We printed 2,000 door hangers in Spanish and English and distributed them by hanging them at the doors. People could visit our webpage when they arrive home from work by typing the URL and scanning the QR code. We concentrated in the west side and tried to tag rental properties as much as possible, not only single-family homes, although at times it was hard to access multi-family buildings. So these maps shows the places we cover by our foot for door hanger distribution. Next. We printed 2,000 bilingual posters in Spanish and English as usual. We left some of them in businesses, libraries, schools, centers, and others. You can see which sites we have dropped our postcards on the map. But also, when people did not have time to complete our surveys for us, we just handed in our postcards to use the QR code to fill out our survey whenever they could. If residents showed a lot of interest, we asked them to share our postcards with their friends and family.
So I'm not sure if, yeah, who had this one, this slide. Maybe they cannot mute themselves. So there was like some social media outreach as well, when the students like posted just in 33 different places, as you can see. And it was like a wide variety. And yeah, if we can keep going to the next, yeah. I think it was like Connor.
Yeah, I think Connor Mangelson actually presented that. I don't think he's in the meeting today.
Yeah, all right. Well, I can just like present these ones. I was trying to so we also like did some outreach of like just nonprofits, also like low income landlords. We had a list of like different schools and just grocery shops, so all kinds of different places, and we asked them to please share with everyone the survey link. And we also asked them, as Chloe was talking about, like dropping some postcards and some posters as well. But in terms of like the email, we contacted 1,000 plus organizations. And this is just like an estimate of all our engagements. So as like Chloe was like discussing, we had like door hangers and postcards and all these like social media posts, all the interviews that we did like last semester, and also there were like some this semester. You will hear in the future about our focus groups, and also about our youth engagement, in where we had like 7 workshops. So altogether we calculate that we completed 8,420 in interactions with people. And of like we actually wanted to reach like 10,000, so that was like our goal for the whole project. So the project will still going on in the summer, so there's still time to reach our goal, but we have done very well.
All right, so here are the locations of the people that have responded to our survey. This is the locations for both the online and the in-person intercept surveys we conducted. All of the surveys within the Salt Lake boundary are in red, and then the ones along the greater Wasatch Front are noted in green. We wanted to make sure we were getting people's experiences with gentrification that might work in Salt Lake, but maybe don't live in the area. So that's why they're also included in this representative. All right, so now we're going to go through some of the demographics of the people who responded to our survey. So most of the people who responded to our survey were in the 22 to 40-year-old age range, most often in that 22 to 30 years old age range. We were able to engage a lot more people in that younger bracket with intercept surveys, and then in the 30 to 40 age range, we were able to get more people engaged online. The majority of our respondents to the survey were women, and most of them were contacted through Intercept, but a good amount of them through the online survey. We were also able to engage people who identify outside of the gender binary, so that's kind of cool. And of our survey respondents, the vast majority of our survey respondents were white, with a notable percentage of Hispanic or Latino respondents. Even though these numbers seem like it's a lot of white people, it does pretty closely match the proportions of racial composition for Greater Salt Lake. So it's pretty neat to see that reflect in our survey results. And then in terms of household income, most of our survey respondents were in a kind of middling income range from $25,000 to $49,000. And then is our next kind of largest bracket would have been that $50,000 to $74,000. And then in terms of living situation, most of our survey respondents were renters. We did get a large chunk of people who were owners. Most of the people who were owners were contacted through the online survey, and then renters tended to be contacted or respond through the Intercept survey. And you can see in terms of the proportion of people who own versus rent in Salt Lake City, there's slightly more renter occupied, units in Salt Lake City. So we did a pretty good job matching that one as well. All right, and then most of the survey respondents are currently able to afford their housing, which is good news, a little under 60%. But if you notice in our second category, we have a little under 30% of residents who are currently finding it difficult to afford their housing, which I think speaks to how important the Thriving in Place project is right now. 30% is a pretty significant group of people, and we want to make sure that everyone is able to comfortably afford their housing in Salt Lake, so they're not having to be stressed about that. Cool, now we'll go over some of the larger questions that we got back from the survey. One of the questions we were asking survey respondents was what their concerns are with the gentrification and displacement. Around 70% of people were really concerned about making sure that people in Salt Lake aren't displaced, which I think speaks to the sense of community that Salt Lake feels, as well as we had 60% of people who noted that they wanted to make sure that the benefits of gentrification are shared by everyone, which again, I think shows that strong sense of community. Generally, though, we had about 30% of people that said that they were very seriously concerned about displacement, which again is probably a little high. All right, and then for our question about what people's experiences with gentrification and displacement were, around 47% of our survey respondents said that they've known people who've been displaced, or they've had to move because they can't afford the area anymore, they were evicted, and then 40% want to buy a home in the Salt Lake area. So if they do want to become a homeowner, they're going to have to likely move away. And then 38% of respondents said that their neighborhood is already gentrified. So I think that these are also additionally very important as we consider ways to move forward. We should consider that some people have already been displaced and some areas might already be pretty far gone in terms of gentrification. Alrighty, and then we also asked survey respondents what they perceive the main causes of gentrification in their areas to be. And most people said that they perceive the lack of affordable housing for low and moderate income people to be a main driver of gentrification, as well as higher income people moving into the area. So those are some of people's lived experiences. And then in terms of how survey respondents thought how they would want to go about solving gentrification and displacement in Salt Lake City, since a lot of them saw the lack of affordable housing as a main cause. A lot of them in turn said that increasing the amount of affordable for low and moderate income people's housing would definitely be beneficial in reducing displacement, as well as having a variety of different housing options, whether those are properties that are for rent or for sale, multifamily, single family. And then we also asked survey respondents what main housing strategy that they would prefer the city to utilize. So we had them kind of rank their first choices. So 40% of respondents wanted the city to prioritize the production of affordable housing, 36% wanted the city to prioritize the protection of renters, and 33% wanted to preserve existing affordable housing stock as the main strategy that the city would use.
Okay, so we wanted to look at the responses of what renters said about displacement versus homeowners. So when we asked about which housing strategies were preferred, renters prioritized protecting renters, whereas homeowners were asking to preserve the affordable housing already there. When it came to asking about how concerned they were about displacement, renters showed the highest level of concern, whereas homeowners showed the lowest. And when asked about the experiences of displacement and gentrification, renters talked more about how they've personally been impacted by displacement and gentrification, whether it's through eviction, not being able to find a place to live in Salt Lake City as a homeowner, or having to move due to rent increase. Whereas homeowners took note of all of that, saying that their neighborhoods were being gentrified, not that they themselves, but more so those around them. And when we asked about how one feels about gentrification, renters had more of a negative view of gentrification, rightfully so, saying that it only made things worse and that there needed to be active solutions and strategies in place to make sure people were not displaced. Whereas homeowners thought that gentrification actually makes the community better. However, both agreed that if gentrification were to take place, those benefits need to be shared by everyone. And just as Emma said, it shows piece of how the community is in these neighborhoods that we were surveying. And then when it came to what they would like to see more of in the community, renters expressed a need for additional housing options, particularly for low and moderate income people, and having homeless services and transitional housing. Whereas homeowners ask more for bolstering their community in terms of the amenities that are available, having places to eat and shop, diverse peoples and cultures, and improving city investment in infrastructure. As well as many of them said that they are content with what's already there and don't want to see anything change. And then when we asked about what people thought were the causes of gentrification, low income surveyors said that it had everything to do with new businesses that were coming in, change in racial composition as predominantly more white populations were coming in and displacing other populations, demolition of buildings, and city policies and ordinances that were impacting those communities, whereas high income expressed that there was not enough housing for families and higher income people were moving into the area. And when asked what would they like to see more of, low income folk mentioned, again, having more housing options, particularly for low and moderate income, whereas high income, again, asked for having an increased amount of amenities. And then we looked at, in terms of white and Latinx responses. And so when asked about what are the causes, white folk said that they would want to make sure that benefits were shared by all and that people were not displaced. And then Latinx mentioned that they want to make sure that it makes the community better instead of making things worse. And some of them did say that they weren't entirely sure what gentrification is, therefore it was difficult to answer. And the white populations mostly said that their preference is to produce and protect, whereas Latinx said that there needs to be more strategies to preserve existing housing.
Next program was youth engagement. We conducted workshop with elementary and middle school students on topic of what gentrification is and tried to engage them to have a conversation about current situation of gentrification and displacement, and did some activities to understand and express their thoughts. There were three contributions that gives us to have more opportunity to engage with young people. 5 Glendale Middle School classes, 1 Jackson Elementary classes, and 1 Pacific Heritage Academy. We had a total of 7 workshops and total of 200 students were engaged to have a variety of exercises. Activity were held based on defining gentrification and displacement, describing the changes that are happening in their community, discussing what home means to them, what does driving means to them, surveying, asking students to draw, build, or list elements of their ideal community. After explaining the terms gentrification and displacement with different materials that could easily understand, and we moved on to the next step of activities. This was a yes or no activity. Within this activity, the most interesting part was most of the students thought their community was changing. This was a whiteboard answering activity. From this activity, we could notice that students identify some of the changes that are happening in their community. For example, they're taking down raging water, or their parents are remodeling their homes. There were more thoughts from students about the changes. It can be described in simple words: demolishing, evictions, and redevelopment. Students were not using exact words of those, however, they could feel and see the changes. For example, the beloved grocery store is gone. New constructions, which is multifamily housing, is being built, and parking lots have been reduced. They also discussed how the neighborhood is improving, but feared that these changes won't be made with them in mind. There were some positive and negative aspects of gentrification. For example, a new building attracts more people, but affects people who already live there. Some students think positive things such as the new park makes a colorful and brighter neighborhood. The next activity was what home means to them. They write on the whiteboard or write it on the paper and posted it to the place house. They wrote it such as place where I can go back, feel acceptance, comfort, sleep, safe place, relax, love, family gathering together. We had a playhouse in the middle of the room. Several students decided to go inside when we had various activities. A student who was homeless went inside and did not want to come out. Once he came out, he said that he wished he had a home. He is currently living in his family's car. Another student, when asked to come out, said, "Why are you evicting me?" which surprised us that they knew this term. When taking down the home at the end, one student said, "Why are you demolishing my home?" This showed us that young people are aware of some of the changes that are going on in their community. The next activity was asking what drive means to them. They explained that drive is to grow, expand, to stay in place, push through tough times, never give up, go somewhere else. The next activity was drawing or listing ideal community. Students drew diverse community with different types of housing, like multifamily for renters and single family homes in subdivision for homeowners. They also drew community with everything that they needed close, such as shops, parks, and school. Some of the students felt a hard time drawing community, so we let the student list what they could find in their ideal community. So they listed such as apartments, trail, diversity, nature, and more things. The most popular exercise of all was Place It, which is technique developed by planner James Rojas, where people are asked to build their ideal community with objects. It was an important activity that should be carried out by integrating all the procedures done so far, and it was an activity that allowed them to express their thoughts. These are the pictures of what they made it. Through eye-level customized education helped to encourage young people to think in a broader and easier way with real-world issues. The most important thing from this workshop are that even though they are young and most of the students did not hear about exact harms of gentrification and displacement, they also feel and recognize the displacement and gentrification where they live.
We also participated in many diverse engagements with actually 14 different trusted community organizations. These were opportunities to collect intercept surveys, of course, but it was also to be present in the community with the organizations that are helping make a difference. Some examples of these engagements, one of the ones that stuck out to me was the attendance of a Catholic Spanish and English Mass at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. The students who participated in that just kind of talked about the project with the church members and collected stories and of course surveys. And some of my colleagues also attended community events like the Family Fun Night with Neighborhood House, small biz markets with BLM, and the Ventanilla de Salud, which was put together by Comunidades Unidas. We also attended some community classes such as those scheduled in CISO Arts and Activism, the Westside Leadership Institute, and Padres Unidos at the Community Learning Center. Some of these engagements lasted 5 minutes, and other half a day. Sometimes we had to focus some focus groups and collected surveys, or just kind of collected surveys and talk to people more informally, kind of like at the Mass, just about the Thriving in Place project. I personally had a brief 5-minute presentation to the citizenship class at Heartland Center. And that was really really engaging. We talked briefly about the topics of gentrification and displacement, and just kind of what citizenship can mean for those two issues. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on was this image here. It's actually from our engagement with Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Resources. We held a focus group where we talked about housing instability, incarceration, displacement involving children, wealth distribution, and multi-generational families as a way of supporting each other.
The project also involved a community liaison, 6 people who were specifically responsible for reaching out to specific communities, mostly in the form of focus groups. However, 2 people decided to carry out in-depth interviews over the period of, I think, 3 or 4 months. So these are the focus groups that took place. As I mentioned, there were 5 of them. Some of them were in Spanish, some of them were in English. They were all led by community liaison. In total, 50 people were engaged. I personally participated in the meeting that took place in Palmer Court, and where participants were 16 people who have recently experienced homelessness or have experienced it over a longer period of time. Some of them chose it over help from family, different situations. We'll go into more detail on the next few slides. So these are the two persons who opted for in-depth interviews that they carried out between January and April of this year, with whom they mostly engage with unhoused individuals, low-income individuals, and low-income individuals living in subsidized housing. And the overall experience was that, you know, there is no one experience of displacement. Some people are being priced out, some are evicted, some have traumatic experiences related to also some health issues. Then also some people just don't have enough information to be on renters' rights to be able to, you know, cope with their situations. Also, their attitudes towards gentrification vary a lot. I mean, obviously, most of them are negative, but some think it's basically caused by rich people. Some actually also think that the state continues on purpose to gentrify without aiding the residents. And generally, they see it as a dangerous trend, and they fear displacement. Some examples of what they think causes gentrification: the city wanting to profit, greed, money, racism, classism. Again, not enough affordable housing, outsiders coming in and not knowing the culture of history or history of the community. Throughout those engagements, we also created a list of places where people turn for help. A lot of people said they turn generally to their community, but just also a number of both religious and nonprofit organizations that offer various types of help. I'm going to go to the next one because pretty much I'm summarizing all of them as I go. When asked how this situation can be addressed, for instance, the people who experience homelessness that I had the pleasure to talk to, they said, you know, that their idea was that homeless people can build houses for themselves if they're allowed to. Also, if there are jobs available for what I mean, they're all skilled in something. So if there are jobs available for skills that they have, you know, that would help them greatly. I think this shortly describes what we've done through, there was a different student assisting, or actually a group of students, usually 3, assisting each community liaison. And we attended the meetings and prepared reports and basically did whatever was needed to be done. This is the summary. I'm thinking, so 20 in-depth interviews were conducted, 5 focus groups, 6 community liaison were in charge of those events. Over 50 participants were involved, and there was 1 workshop. Also, what some of the participants suggested that some, if not many, of the problems could be addressed simply by fixing properties that already exist, and that existing affordable housing needs to be protected and more affordable housing needs to be built.
So we have 2 culminating events. Both of them are artistically influenced, one of which already took place at the Confluence Park, and the other one will take place at Dual Immersion Academy. Both are created by our artist, Miriam Gutierrez, and thank you to our sponsors, ACE Funding, University Neighborhood Partners, and the Benyon Center. And we'll look at those murals a little closely and as to why they were created in a little bit. So when it comes to where we're going to go from here, throughout the summer, there will be additional survey pushes to get more people to respond to the survey, and also looking at it through a high level and community level approach in terms of what is there that we can take from these survey responses and from all the work that's been done, and how do we create meaningful strategies that can also be co-planned and co-strategized with the community. And there it's bears to mention that there isn't a silver bullet, that this is a very complex issue, and there are so many things that can be done, but there's also so many things that need to be taken into account. So the work is going to be intentional, is going to involve looking at it through a system level lens, and involve collective work in terms of it may take many community partners at the table to create strategies that are meaningful and impactful. So we created a mural that is now at the Confluence Park. If you have an opportunity, I encourage you to go check it out. And this was a response to really finding a way to talk about what we did over the course of the semester, as well as to represent the communities that are surrounding the park. And so if you see, we created the foundation with the artist, and we had an event the following day where children and their families could come and fill it in with shapes. And what's nice about this mural is that in multiple languages, it says, "We live here, we thrive here," to say that there are so many beautiful cultures and communities that are here, that are thriving, and this is their home. Next slide, please. And then Dual Immersion Academy, if you could go back, Justina, sorry. Dual Immersion Academy also is working with Miriam to create a mural, and this was a response to the fact that the neighborhood is also facing a lot of displacement. Across the street from Dia is Tejadas Market, which was the only source of culturally relevant food. It was the only grocery store within walking distance that recently closed and is making way for mixed-use development. Many of the families are upset, and many of the families are also moving away. And this was a way to talk about how displacement also impacts schools and impacts the students at those schools and enrollment numbers. So the students right now are working on creating this beautiful mural with the help of Flick and the families of the students that go there. And so this is something to look forward to in the future. So we wanted to say a big thank you to everyone involved, and for all of you who have listened to us present on this work. If you have any questions, I think now is the time, and we welcome any thoughts, feedback, and inquiries.